of partnering with TurboVote, while still providing all the same resources and support that a traditional four-year institution or to your partner that goes about our standard partnership process would have access to, with additional commitment to learning about and engaging with the community college student population. And then the last thing I wanted to briefly touch on is a report that we recently released with the Ad Council, looking at effective messaging strategies for different generations is actually how they frame it. And so it provides some context and information about how do we effectively talk to and about voting with various demographic groups and age groups within the spectrum of voters. I can talk more about TurboVote and other things later on, but I figure that's a good enough start to the world of Democracy Works to begin with.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It is nice to hear, we hear all of these different organizations, and so it's really great to hear what each of you are doing. So next, let's see, I'm on my thing here. So I guess next in my picture is Joshua. Are you willing to go next, Joshua?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Gail. So I'm Josh Young. I'm the college-wide director for the Institute for Civic Engagement and Democracy at Miami-Dade College. We're a huge community college in Miami-Dade County. We have 8 campuses, about 125,000 students. We're 92% minority, mainly Hispanic. About a third of our students are not citizens. And most, I think about 2/3 are low income. And just some more context, we've had, for the last 25 years, incredible presidential leadership. Dr. Eduardo Padron was our president, and he was just so committed to everything from TurboVote when it first started to just making our college, he used to call our college Democracy's College. Mm-hmm. So we were blessed to have so much support from the top down, which I know not every school has, and a lot of our accomplishments are due to his leadership. He recently retired. We're in the process of finding a new leader. We have a lot of faculty administrative buy-in. One thing that we also have going for us, which a lot of community colleges don't, is we have a department, the Institute for Civic Engagement and Democracy, with part-time and or full-time staff on all 8 campuses. So we're able to support this work to the best of our ability. Another thing about the context of the work we do here in Miami and in Florida is we're a battleground state. And I guess there are more and more battleground states now, but that's given us a lot more national attention and more opportunities for funding and grants. And it's just opened up a lot of doors. So that's one advantage of being in a battleground state. And so our students don't come from a culture of voting, and many of them, their families maybe haven't voted. They're from places like Cuba or Venezuela, where they recently immigrated from, and they just are very skeptical about voting and does their vote count in politics. So there's a lot of barriers, but it's very important work. I know half of college students in the United States attend community colleges, so it's essential to the health of our democracy that we really focus on our students. So we have a lot of great partnerships with all kinds of organizations that have really helped us, like the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition, the Democracy Works, TurboVote, Andrew Goodman Foundation, the Fair Elections Legal Network, Campus Vote Project, Voter Friendly Campus Program. And one of the main things that we've done is do a lot of great work with National Voter Registration Day. So we've made a big commitment to that starting maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So every year now, even in off years, we either have a college-wide, huge college-wide event where we bus students in and DJs and speakers and celebrities sometimes, or in the off years, we at the very least do a National Voter Registration Day event on every campus. And we do social media, press releases, text, emails to students, faculty announce it. So that's really become one of the hallmarks of our work. We often have the supervisor of elections. We've had dunk tanks with students with masks of the various candidates so people can try to dunk their candidate. We've had a couple of Joy of Voting grants from Civic Nation that have helped with that. Free food, of course, to draw students in. And then I'll just say a few comments about voter registration. 2 years ago, with the help of some of the people on this call and the League of Women Voters, Andrew Goodman Foundation, other Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition, we were able to get early voting on 2 of our campuses, our 2 largest campuses, which is huge, incredible opportunity to educate students and mobilize them. So even the presidential primaries, which happen next month, we have early voting at our 2 largest campuses. And that's just an opportunity that we're trying to build on and do more with. And we have some great partnerships, like Engage Miami is a local 501c3 that has about 30 full and part-time staff that help us on all of our campuses doing voter registration, voter education. Andrew Goodman Foundation, we have 6 paid interns. We also have interns from CEAP, the Campus Election Engagement Project, from Campus Vote Project. So last election cycle, we actually had about 25 paid interns of our own, hiring our own students, and that's been a very successful strategy. And last year, with all of our partners, we collected about 5,000 voter registration forms. And just a couple more things I'll say, and I'll send this to Vertus to put on the resource page, but we made these buttons that say, "This is why I vote." And in the middle, it's blank, so we give students a pen. We talked about why is voting important to you, and we have them take a permanent marker and write on the button, and then we give them the button. So we had like 20, 30,000 of those buttons made and distributed. We also created a website, mdc.edu/vote, as a one-stop place for faculty and students to help get themselves to be election ready. The key for us is faculty outreach, because we're a community college and our students work and they go to school part-time. So we're always trying to do a lot with our faculty to help them be confident and have the information they need to get their students registered and out to vote. And we also have done a lot with Vote Together. And we have something called Don't Cast a Zombie Vote, where students dress like zombies and walk around campus, advertising an information session that's going to happen the following week, so you can understand the ballot. Because our ballot last time was 13 pages long, so it's overwhelming for everyone. I'll stop there because I've been going for a while, but I have a few more things I can add later. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. It sounds like an amazing system down there, and that you all have invested a lot of time and energy and thought. So we're really excited to hear about it. And for those of you listening, as Josh said, these resources will be in the resource section, so you don't have to remember everything that everybody has said here today. So let's turn to Kathryn now and hear from her.
Hi, my name is Kathryn. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the partnerships manager at the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition. And I can share a little bit about our organization and what we do around National Voter Registration Day. So we are the largest group of nonpartisan organizations across the country dedicated to increasing student voter participation. We don't think about our work in election seasons, but we think about how do you create long-term sustainable plans on college campuses to increase student voter participation, but also civic engagement and civic learning as a whole. We do this in 4 steps. So it's called our LEAP checklist, which is our way of thinking about institutionalizing student voter participation, which many campuses do, Josh being one of them. And that's LEAP, lead, identify someone on a campus, a champion, if you will, engage, create an on-campus voting coalition, assess, measure your campus registration and voting rates through the National Study for Learning, Voting, and Engagement, and finally plan, which is draft and publicly share a written action plan that will be evaluated from year to year. And so that's kind of our North Star of the work that we do, and we do several different campaigns to help accomplish that goal. One of them is that we partner with the Alliance for Youth Organizing on a campaign called Campus Takeover, which is part of National Voter Registration Day. And it's a way for us, what are words? They're a way for us to support and amplify NVRD efforts that are happening on college campuses in order to guide students in becoming lifelong voters. So this is our 3rd year in doing that, and we have done and will continue to do mini grants that are around $250 that campuses can apply for. Also, we do a toolkit that you can find on our Students Learn Students Vote website. We have weekly webinars which talk about different facets of like how to create a plan and how do you work with like press, to how do you train your volunteers and things like that. We also do a Twitter takeover around campus takeover, or Twitter takeover before National Voter Registration Day, specifically for college campuses, which kind of builds up hype around this work. And this year we're working towards doing some cool outreach support, as well as connections between campuses. A lot of our role is like supporting campuses and doing this work, but also a lot of campuses and organizations are doing National Voter Registration Day events, but may not know that they're like another organization working on that same campus. So we work towards connecting them. And so instead of working disparately, you all can like work together to support that work overall. So there's a lot of other things that the coalition does, like, for example, helping support campuses get on-campus polling locations, to how do you create full participation. So basically a campaign around making sure every student on campus is asked to register to vote. But I can stop there because this is around National Voter Registration Day.
Thank you so much. I want to invite the folks on the call to type in questions, or I can unmute you to see if you have questions that you want to ask of our speakers. And I can start with the first one. And Kathryn, you kind of started this, but this is for Nicole and Josh as well. So there are a lot of people that are working on voting and voter registration and those kind of things. And so what are your best practices for what you just said, Kathryn, of making sure that people on campuses are talking with each other and, you know, making the effort a combined effort rather than working against each other?
Yeah, so you broke up a little, but I think your question was around how do you make sure everyone is working together on a campus? And I think that it's very complicated depending on the scale and scope of your campus. Like if you are in a small liberal arts school, which is less than 1,000 students, and you kind of like know who the major players are. But if you're on a campus like Josh, where you have like 70,000 students decentralized over 8 campuses, then it's a little bit harder for you to like figure out what's going on. I think the biggest thing is like creating an on-campus voting coalition is super important, and then power mapping who you want to have on your in your coalition. Ironically, we are working on creating curriculum around coalition building right now as we speak, but I think that's the biggest piece, right? Figuring out who the stakeholders are on your campus, who do you want to aspire to be part of it, and if you're inviting someone to be part of a community, then they're more interested in being part of that process. And so if there are multiple people doing multiple things, what is that shared mission that you all want, which is hopefully to advance the student vote? And then how can you bring them in on a variety of different examples to help do that?
Thank you. Josh or Nicole, do you have a thought?
I can jump in. So it's important to have a designated person. We're also busy doing so many things, and so how do you get a designated person that, even if it's a part-timer, and so maybe you need to get a grant or carve out some time of someone else's position. But if you don't have someone who's really going to help lead this, even if it's just 5 or 10 or 15 hours a week, it's hard to move it from the margins to the mainstream. Another thing that we did last election cycle and we're about to redo is we made a video with our students talking about why voting is important. And we disseminated that widely, hundreds of faculty showed that in their classes. And then we set up a website that was highlighted in the video. So it would drive students, and faculty would encourage students to go to that website, and it had all the information they needed to be election ready. So that's going to be a big part of our strategy. And this video was just made in-house. Most colleges have a department that can make a pretty high quality video. You know, it's like 2 minutes long, and but that was very successful. And then I also think we did vote together, and we had funding from many places like Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition, and Andrew Goodman Foundation, and others. So we have more than 100 events at our college where faculty, students, or community members could. There's a simple process to propose your event and request funding. And that really generated a lot of excitement to celebrate voting, make it joyous, make it fun. And the key there, though, is the fact that we had some funding, and even $50 or $100, you know, was helpful. A lot of times faculty got food and had a party in their class. So it is helpful to have some mini grant funds. And I'll put this up on the resource page. I have our flyer that describes the whole process and all the details. But we want to continue that in 2020.
Fantastic. Nicole, do you have any thoughts about?
Sure. So just a couple of things to tack on at the end, because I think Josh and Kathryn both did a really great job of giving like comprehensive overviews of like buy-in and participation and connections. I'm sure I don't have to say this, but I will anyway. When we're talking about like how do we get everybody to come to the table to work together, I would recommend making sure that we're inviting students to the table, because I think that they can be the conveners in ways that when you're working across departments or across divisions, it would be a little bit harder. I think that because students are a part of everyone's mission on a college campus, having them as the bridges can help create this community sense of involvement and initiative. And then I guess like two other things that I think about is thinking about uncommon allies. A lot of the work that I do on a day-to-day basis is talking to people like legal counsel or purchasing agents, which is not the typical person you think about when you're thinking about voter engagement, but that also doesn't mean that they're not advocates and allies for this work, but they also have those inroads and access points across divisions and departments and teams. So having some sort of engagement or integration of them into your work can help create those bridges between multifactorial engagement efforts. And the last thing that I think about is when we're talking about how do we get people on the same page about doing voter engagement work, having the discussions about voter engagement in the places people already are. So if your faculty has a faculty retreat before the new academic year begins in the summer, maybe having something in that saying like, hey y'all, are you registered to vote? Have you considered putting it as part of your like syllabi? Something like that. Similarly with students, when students have like mandatory things that they're already a part of. Whether that's an email from the bursar about paying bills, or if that's doing something where like annual check-in processes or class registration, things like that, having other people having the message about voter engagement in the places where people already are existing is going to keep it front of mind. So if a student sees it, then they're thinking about voter engagement, they're bringing it up to their advisors, their professors, their support systems, their peers, and that way the conversation continues, and it's not just centrally located in like, who are the strongest players in this space? Like your civic engagement directors are going to be thinking about voter engagement, but is your engineering professor? If not, why not? And how do we get them as part of the conversation? And I think that that comes along with the territory of getting the message in the places where people already exist.
Thank you. I love that creativity, and it actually kind of starts us off on the next question that I was interested in, and that is kind of innovative or successful things that you've done. And it sounds like one of the innovative things you've done, Nicole, is thinking of the unlikely partners that I wouldn't have thought of. And Kathryn, I'm wondering if are there other things that maybe surprised you that you guys tried and it's like, oh, this works, or this was kind of innovative or very successful that people don't think of right away?
So are you thinking about just generally coalition building, or just like, it's on the side, general tactics of like voter engagement general? Yeah.
I think probably tactics.
Yeah, so there have been some really fun tactics that we've seen. A lot of people have brought vote goats onto college campuses. And so people are like, why is there a goat on my campus? And then they're like, yeah, great question. Also, do you want to register to vote? Or like, do you want to talk about voting? So that one's pretty cool. I want to plus one Josh's, like, what is it? Don't your zombies in voting?
Yeah, don't cast a zombie vote.
Don't cast a zombie vote. I think that's also super fun. To partly answer the question that's also in the chat, it's like we have seen a lot of things called parties at the polls, where people think about voting as a celebration and not a civic duty. And so on election day or during early election season, people will create parties and like have celebrations and like bring dogs to campus, or like have music going on. And so then people can feel really super inclined to like being like, what is that party? Oh, it's voting, like, and having that association of voting with something celebratory. And so like if you're trying to work on a campus where it's mostly people who are from out of state or want to vote at home, like doing a party at the mailbox, for example, and having one day where people can like request their ballots or submit their ballots as a celebration. And so I think the most effective tactics have been ways that you integrate civic engagement with building community, or civic engagement with like making it a celebratory and joyous moment for them.
Thank you. That's awesome. Did you want to answer that question, Josh, or do you want to go on to the?
Well, this kind of fits, but we joined INSOLVE, the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement, and that's been so helpful. I just honestly, I can't think of a reason why a college wouldn't join if they really understood how easy it is and how much helpful data that it provides. But any college that's serious about this work definitely needs to be part of that study through Tufts University. We've used that data a lot to help all of us understand the realities and set some goals and challenges to our entire institution.
And I think also, Josh, to add to that, is that when you're thinking about how do you do voter engagement, not about where it's most easy on your campus, but where it's most needed on your campus, like the NSOLVE reports are super helpful to see like who is not voting at the same rates as their other peers, and then how do you create an equitable like outreach to different communities on your campus. And so it really does support knowing like who is on your campus, who's not voting on your campus. Oh, like STEM folks are traditionally those who are undersupported in their voter engagement. And so like, how do you intentionally reach out to those communities in those spaces, and then backing it with NSOLVE numbers when you are looking for funding or like looking for what to prioritize in your plans.
And the other thing I'll add is, I mentioned this earlier, but the paid voter engagement intern positions we have been fantastic, especially Andrew Goodman Foundation, because they're year round. They don't ebb and flow with election cycle. We have 6 of them year round every year, and they've just brought a lot of energy and gotten their peers involved. And also SEEP, as I mentioned, and Campus Vote Project have provided a lot of the same positions. And they've infused just great ideas and energy and creativity into the work that we're doing.
Fantastic. It's always nice to have those kind of opportunities.
Yeah. And the key is they're paid a stipend, so there's more accountability. It's not a lot of money, but that makes a difference.
Melanie in our chat box is asking about how to engage students who want to vote in their home state. Maybe they're going to college in a different state, and there's different timelines for registering, and you know, person, Melanie, not knowing all of the different state rules and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering if some of you could answer. Kathryn started answering that, but are there any other things that Melanie could think about?
I can jump on that one because I feel like I'm a particularly good fit. So I mentioned earlier that Democracy Works are the makers of TurboVote, and TurboVote has an in-house research team that works directly with elections administrators at the state, county, and municipal levels across the U.S. And so we have databases of election information for literally every election you could think that you think that you'd want to know. And that's for both registration information as well as election information. So process related things like how to vote, when to vote, where to vote, as well as like things like ID and things like absentee ballots. So that sort of work. What TurboVote does specifically for colleges and universities is we take some of the guesswork out of doing the voter registration assistance and the vote by mail request assistance. So when you sign up for TurboVote, you're asked if you'd like support completing voter registration, and our research and our databases inform the way that the user's experience in TurboVote happens. So I'm from the state of New Jersey. We don't have online voter registration, so they will walk me through the process of completing the National Voter Registration Form. But for example, if the user is coming from New York and they do have online voter registration, we'll say, hey, you're from New York. If you want to use online voter registration in New York, you need both a New York driver's license, a social security number, and the address on your ID has to match the address that you're registering to vote at. There's no way for a campus with students from all 50 states to know that specific detailed information. But our teams it's their jobs to make sure that we're getting good information and getting that out to any users. So that's like one way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about it is encouraging your students when it comes to like election like preparations of the voter registration, the vote by mail request assistance, that sort of work. If you're not using TurboVote or your students are concerned about doing digital work, making sure that they're completing their paper forms and that they have the resources to participate, so like stamps and envelopes. Surprisingly challenging for many students to get access to or to keep like top of mind. My organization creates a website called nextelections.org, and we have a website called Get to the Polls. Both of those are available as resources to find out, one, when your next election is. So that goes to our database and pulls all of the elections that we have within the next however many days, and it's constantly changing and evolving. And then Get to the Polls will give anyone who searches their voter registration address information on how and where to be voting. Those are national, they're across the board. You don't need to be a TurboVote user to use either of those, but they are available and hopefully they'll make your life easier so you don't have to be an expert. You can rely on the experts to be doing the work for you.
And Nicole, also, you don't actually have to be a TurboVote partner to use our website, right?
Absolutely. So publicturbovote.org is available to anybody. And if you want to have that customized student experience, you can always talk to me and we can see if there's a way for you to work with us directly.
I would also I love everything Nicole is saying. I love +1 about TurboVote because, again, there are a lot of really complicated laws that are happening in general about like engaging student voters who are trying to vote in their home state. It's also offering reminders to let them know like when general deadlines are happening, right? So a good rule of thumb is like 30 days before an election, you should always like register to vote. You should also, while you register to vote, go ahead and like request your absentee ballot if that is something that your state is like trying, like, well, actually, yeah, all states require this. So just ensuring that people are knowing about these deadlines and having some sort of like on-campus activity. And so you're like, hey, by the way, like, go to your math class, but also don't forget to register to vote because there's an election happening. And so I think just being cognizant of that and also just knowing like if your campus knows where is a critical mass of students that are going to your campus. So I went to Florida State, so it was pretty easy to know that a majority of the students were coming from Florida, but we know that there was a big concentration of students from Georgia coming. So you wanted to keep an eye on their like respective elections that are happening as well. And so those are just some other thoughts.
I just want to say quickly, TurboVote, like this question, TurboVote was created to respond to your question, Melanie, and it's fantastic. It's exactly what a college needs to make this easy for them.
Thank you for creating TurboVote.
I want to make one quick additional plug, not for TurboVote. So when it comes to information about how students can vote in their home state, the Campus Vote Project State Student Guides, State Student Guides, I think is what it is. I'll put the link in the chat. Gives sort of the legal framework for the requirements to be voting in each of the states across the U.S. So if you don't have an answer, or if a student has a specific question that's relevant to their state, they can look that up.
Fantastic. I felt like I'm not well versed in this topic, so that's why I'm partly on this, so that I can learn as well. And I felt like there were some campuses who were making an effort where a student could actually vote on campus rather than in their hometown. Is that actually a thing, or am I just remembering that wrong?
Yes, there's a federal law that states that a student can have the choice to either vote on their campus or vote at home. And so it should it's definitely up to them on how they want to actually vote. So they want to vote in their community, or because they get to vote in person, or they want to vote where their campus is, that's totally fine. But if they have particular political or whatever their reasons are, they can also vote at home. So it's just up to them on how they choose to do that. And if anyone tells you that you're wrong, then just say no.
I'll have them call you.
Sure, have them call me. I can yell at them.
That's great. So I'm curious, so there's just a ton of efforts that are going on to get students to register. What's the pushback? Like what are the things, the barriers? Why do students not want to register, and what are the successful arguments, I don't know, for helping them change their mind?
Yeah, I love this question. We get this question quite often. I used to work with a bunch of students where they're like, I get it, but I can't get my friends to care about voting. And I think that there are a lot of physical barriers that you could talk about, right? You could talk about like lack of access to polling locations. You could talk about a very complicated voter registration and turnout process. But when you really think about it, there was like this really cool study that I will reference till the day I die, which is from Ideas 42, which is around the behavioral science around first-time and student voters. And so when we think of students and we think about young people, oftentimes we're just like, you hear that rhetoric of like, oh, they're lazy. But if you think about them as first-time voters and think about how we frame doing anything for the first time, it's very overwhelming and complicated, right? And so when we think about what are the three things? One is just like the voting process is complicated, right? And so how do you make it easier for them and support them? It's two, they have psychological distance from being a voter and actually being like, and having an identity of being a voter. And so thinking through how can we help students identify themselves as voters? How can they identify themselves as like someone who's a part of that process? And so when we just think through about, yes, how do we address the physical barriers to get them to vote, which is like having very progressive voter registration laws, having very progressive like on-campus polling location laws, and like all of these things to make it easier for them to vote. But also, what are the voter education things that we can work on to make sure that students feel that they're supported throughout their voter journey, and campuses have this unique position in which they are with them during the formation of their identity as voters. And so like, how do we create that voter education so we can get students to think of themselves as voters?
I'll also jump onto that statement and say that census data actually indicates that that beyond apathy, because I think a lot of people think about the apathetic student voter, data does not indicate that that is like the primary driver of why people don't vote. The primary driver of reasons why people don't register and people don't turn out on election or turn out to participate in election is actually process barriers. So things like not having their registration form like accepted by the state, not having access to transportation to the polls, not being able to get off of work or out of class, things like that. So those process barriers, which make it a little bit more complicated to participate, are the things that are deterrents in developing that like identity as a voter. And that creates the lifelong habit of not voting rather than voting. And there is a lot of research that indicates that the habit is what sticks with people over time. So just wanted to back it up from the United States government.
Thank you.
And I would also, just interject of just saying, like, all of these things, me and Nicole talked about the barriers to voting, but to specifically answer your question of like, if someone goes, why should I vote? Which is a very common question for me. I'm like, it's not about who you vote for, it's about how do you show up for yourself and for your community. And so like a quick example that I always share with folks is like Asian Americans, like we were never showing up in Hollywood for the longest time, but in 2016 there was like this turning point where you're starting to see a lot of Asian Americans in the movie theaters. And you see that there was a study in 2016 that Asian Americans were the most likely to go watch a movie. They were watching 3 times as many as like their white counterparts. And so what are you starting to see? Asian Americans in movies. And so just like it is in the movie industry, it's just like in the political industry. Like they are only caring about the people whose butts are in the seats. These are like Asian Americans who are watching movies. So they're going to make movies that cater towards Asian Americans. People are voting in a particular area, so they're going to cater towards those communities, right? So it's about, yes, who you vote for, but it's also like making sure that you're coming there consistently. So when you have an issue that you want to bring up for your community, then they know that you're already showing up and that they should cater their policies to help support you and your space. And also just like you vote for your community, right? I vote because like for women, I vote for Asian Americans, like I vote for my community. And so like if you yourself are like, I don't know, like think about the communities that you represent, especially those communities who do not have that opportunity to vote themselves.
Thank you.
So yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And I just think one of the reasons I've stayed at Miami-Dade College for so long is because it's very exciting because our students have so much potential, but they're busy, they're working, they're struggling with day-to-day life, families, and it's not that they don't care, and then they're impacted every day by so many issues that could be solved by better elected officials. So the process of helping awaken them and give them more of the foundational knowledge and understanding, unfortunately, it's all there just to be drawn out, but it takes intentionality, it takes hard work, it takes time and resources. But it's so beautiful when you see it happen. And things like guest speakers or bringing elected officials on campus who they can actually talk to, focusing on local elections and helping them see the importance of local elections. As I mentioned earlier, just professors finding ways to build this into their courses and somehow connect to whatever their course objectives are. At Miami-Dade College, one of our learning outcomes for the whole college is personal, civic, and social responsibility. So every faculty, to a certain extent, is encouraged to incorporate these kinds of things into their classes. And we also recently came up with something called a civic action checklist. So it has 50 civic actions, like know who your elected officials are, watch a debate, write a letter to the editor. So it's like baby steps, and you earn points by doing these things. But we've seen a lot of students really get activated and better understand what it means to be an engaged citizen. And registering to vote is one of the things you can earn points for, or help a friend register to vote. So it's really helping, starting at the bottom, because like I have a lot of students that come to me and say, well, can you tell me what the difference between a Democrat and Republican is? And it's like, where do you start? And most of our students register as independent because it's too much to figure out, am I a Republican, Democrat? So just to get them registered, which has consequences because right now we have closed primaries in Florida. Mm-hmm. So if they register as independent, they can't vote. But there's a lot of factors, but it's exciting to see them become lifelong voters.
This call has really made me think about, I don't even remember when I registered to vote. I'm on the older side. And so thinking about what that was like. And I love the idea of helping people do something for the first time. That's, registering to vote is something that's new. So we have about 6 minutes left, and I'd like to give each of you just a couple minutes if there's anything else that you haven't told us yet or that you've thought of, or if not, then maybe a summary about for folks that are doing this work, some encouragement for how they might keep at it and help more and more students.
Whether or not you are doing this for the first time or you are a seasoned veteran like Josh, there are resources and support out there for you. Local, state, and national groups are here and excited to do this work, not just for this year, but every year, right? And so whether this is the moment that you want to really kickstart to get people activated for 2020, I would challenge you to think about how do you create this movement right now and this energy around 2020 to start building resources and access points for students on your campus for the long term every single year. 2020 is exciting because no matter what, there is probably funding for you somewhere, and there's probably people who are more than gung-ho to help you. But these are things that are around every single year. So please register for National Voter Registration Day. That is a super exciting and easy touch point to start off with. And when you do, you should click to participate in Campus Takeover so you can know about our webinars as well as our grant opportunities and things like that. If you're more of a seasoned person who really wants to do some really cool work around getting polling locations on your campus, there is an organization who's doing that, and us being a partner in that too. So please reach out if that is something that you're interested in. And there are a lot of other cool and exciting things that are happening. So just keep around. There are a lot of fun things going on.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. And I love the message about the ongoingness of it, that it's not just a one-time thing or in the big elections, but to have it be a tradition. Thank you. Nicole, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. I will reiterate what Kathryn said and talk briefly about long-term thinking. We want to encourage students to become lifelong voters, and therefore we also want to encourage colleges and universities to be lifelong advocates for democratic citizenry and democratic participation by students. So laying the groundwork now for 4 years from now, 8 years from now, 12 years from now, which is terrifying for me to think about. And given that there is a lot of momentum and there's already a lot of people in the space who are willing to provide additional resources and support, might help you lay that framework right now. My one plug and my always plug is use technology where you can. This work is hard, but it doesn't have to be impossible. Whether that's TurboVote and any one of our tools and our resources, or thinking about what other forms of technology can you use to streamline processes, whether that's email or a banner on your learning management system or email signature lines for all of faculty and staff on campus. There are ways to make things a little bit easier so that you don't have to put in as much legwork up front for the administrative side of things. So you can focus your time and your energy on doing the education and engagement pieces. I'm happy to talk to anybody about TurboVote, or if you have any questions about voting technology at literally any point, my email will be included, I'm sure, in whatever follow-up is happening. And if TurboVote's not the best answer for you, I'm happy to connect you with other people in the space to maybe make your lives a little bit easier.
So I think this is an exciting time for voter engagement in higher ed. There's unprecedented support, attention, opportunities. It used to be that we only paid attention just a little bit every 4 years on the presidential cycle. And now, as it was said a minute ago, it's so important. We need to do this year round, every day, every year, and focus on local elections. There's so many great resources and so much information to share, and the voter-friendly campus designation, the All-in Democracy Challenge. There's so many ways in planning guides, so many ways to build momentum at your school and to get resources from others who have already done some of the legwork, like Kathryn and Nicole and others. I think.
Thank you. Okay. This is such a rich hour, and so I want to thank our speakers again, Nicole Costa from Democracy Works, Kathryn Quinton from the National Conference on Citizens, Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition, and Josh Young from Miami-Dade College. Vertus from the Campus Compact will assemble all of the resources that were talked about today and put them on the resource page so that they're available to you. We have a lot of resources in the chat that we will capture for you so that you can have that as available for you. And I know that each of our 3 speakers today would love to help you and help your campus and your students move forward. So thank you all so much for participating, and thank you to our speakers, and let's go register people to vote.
Thank you, Gail.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.